Hi guys, it's Rebecca from Book and Reflections, and these are my favourite books of 2020. So for the most part I've just included my favourite fiction books because I feel like the non-fiction are more for me to work on myself. So I've just included my favourite fiction books, but I have cheated a little bit and you will find out how in a moment. So the first book I'm going to mention is Pumpkinhead by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks. This is a graphic novel about Deja and Josiah, who have always worked together on the pumpkin patch every Halloween, and it's all about how they are now seniors. They're going to be leaving, going to do different things, but they decide to go out with a bang and go on an adventure together. And I thought this was just a really sweet, joyful, hopeful book to read. Very, very quick because it is a graphic novel. But I absolutely love this. And this is where I'm going to cheat. The next person that I'm going to talk about is Nick Stone. So this was the year that I discovered Nick Stone. We've got Dear Martin, Dear Justice and Jackpot. Dear Martin and Dear Justice are companion novels, and they're about Justice and Quan, who are two black boys who live in the same neighbourhood and are around the same people. But Justice was able to go to a more affluent school and kind of get himself out of the situation that he was growing up in, but Quan didn't have that same opportunity. So in Dear Martin we see Justice realising that just because he does have a little bit more privilege with his education, it doesn't mean that he can escape the racism and the microaggressions that occur. Dear Justice is about Quan, who is in prison for something that he didn't do, and it's about the justice system and how it fails boys like Quan over and over again, and the friendship that develops further with Justice and Quan. Jackpot is about a young girl called Rico who is having to work after school to help her family because they struggle to pay the bills. Her little brother is very ill and has a chronic disease, so anything that Rico can do to support the family she will do. So one day while she's working at the gas station, she realises that someone she sold a lottery ticket to has the winning ticket, so she's trying to track down that person. I love Nick Stone's writing style. I love the way that she can sprinkle a bit of humour in places, and that her books are all full of heart. And I love the characterisation and the relationships between each of the characters that Nick creates. So I honestly regard her as one of my auto-buy authors for YA fiction. And just look how beautiful those colours look together. Look at that. The next book I'm going to talk about is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This one I've already reread in 2021, but it is about a man called Linus who is a social worker in the department in charge of magical youth, and he goes to an orphanage which nobody else is supposed to know about in order to assess how that orphanage looks after the children in that orphanage. I absolutely love this. I've talked about this quite a lot, so I'm not going to waste your time anymore, but I absolutely adore this. I adore the characters and the relationships, and I'm already talking about it. I said I wasn't going to. The next book I'm going to mention is It's a Whole Spiel, Love, Latkes and Other Jewish Stories, which is an anthology edited by Catherine Locke and Laura Silverman. It's also got a foreword which is by Mayim Bialik, who is the actress and neuroscientist from Big Bang Theory. This is an anthology that really looks at the Jewish experience and how it's very different for everybody. It's about people who don't feel Jewish enough. It's about how Judaism and race intersect, and the LGBT community, and I found so many interesting, heartbreaking, hilarious stories in here and authors that I will absolutely check out in future. But I just thought this was such an interesting anthology, particularly for somebody who doesn't know a lot about Judaism. I feel like it was handled really well and it's very accessible to read. The next book I'm going to talk about is My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyenkin Braithwaite. This is a fantastic mystery, but it's also more about the relationships with a family, and it's about a nurse whose sister keeps finding boyfriends that don't seem to last very long. The book is very much about the relationships that the sisters have with each other and the jealousy and history that they have. They don't have an easy upbringing, particularly with their father, so it does look more at that aspect than a mystery or thriller trope, I guess. But I thought this was fantastic. I love how Oyenkin writes, and I have already pre-ordered her future books because I know that she's somebody who is going to bring a lot to the literary community.
I read Fred. I'm Becca and I'm from Bookworm Reflections and I like books and that.
Do you see what I have to put up with? The next cheat I'm going to make is talking about the Locked Tomb trilogy by Tamsin Muir. This is Gideon the Ninth and Harrow the Ninth, and these are some of the most complex science fiction fantasy novels I've ever read. In fact, it's definitely one of those series where you read it and you wonder if you're too dumb to take in the story. I certainly felt like that anyway. But the first one is about Gideon, who is a necromancer, and she's trying to strike out, make it on her own, leave the planet that she currently lives on. But Harrow, who is the reverend daughter, so she is kind of like, I suppose, the princess of the planet, is not letting her go. She needs somebody to be her cavalier or her swordswoman in a competition that the emperor of the system has set out in order to get lictors, or superhuman warriors, I guess. So this is snarky and funny and sweet and confusing and very scientific, but there's just something that pulls me in and keeps my attention. With these kinds of books, if I get too confused or I don't understand the world, I'm just going to ditch it. But there's something about the way that Tamsin writes that keeps me intrigued and makes me want to know. The next book I'm going to talk about is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is a historical fiction novel about a girl called Daisy and the band that she puts together, the Six. And it's actually inspired by Fleetwood Mac and the whole Rumours album infamy of a band that is held together with the music, but the relationships that they have with each other and the trauma that each of them are kind of processing themselves kind of is pulling them apart. But this was fantastic and dark, and I love how it's laid out. It's told like it's a podcast. I think this was the first Taylor Jenkins Reid book that I picked up, and since then I've already picked up 2 others, and I'm going to continue because I love how she writes. She always makes me want to just binge her books. This one I think I read in about 5 hours, and I think I did the same with Evelyn Hugo. The next book is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is a contender for my favourite book of the year. I think it's probably tied with The House in the Cerulean Sea. This is very much inspired by the story of Hamlet by Shakespeare, which is also inspired by the real life death of Shakespeare's son, Hamnet. So this looks at grief and womanhood, and Agnes, who is, I suppose, Anne Hathaway, but back then it could also be Agnes. She is very much a woman who is born out of her time, so she doesn't want to be a prim and proper lady. She doesn't want to have to be confined in order to give birth in a darkened room for days on end. She wants to spend time with nature. She wants to commune with the natural world, and it's all about their family dynamic that they have. And I love that in a story about grief and about a relationship with a son, Shakespeare's name is never mentioned. He is never the central part of this plot. It is all about Agnes and Agnes's family. This is absolutely heartbreaking and emotional, and this is the only novel where I've ever been interested in the journey of a flea. I'm totally cheating again, but I'm also going to mention Clap When You Land and With a Fire on High by Elizabeth Azevedo. So With a Fire on High is about Imani, who is a teenage girl who's also a mother to a 2-year-old daughter, and she is destined to be a chef. Obviously, with being a teen mother, it's difficult for her to really hone her craft and spend the time that she needs to progress. But this was just absolutely precious. I loved how it looked at single motherhood and how the father of Imani's child doesn't have to have the same standard of parenting care, I guess, as Imani does. She is very much vilified if she does something that people don't view as right, whereas he's able to get off scot-free and only see his daughter at certain points and kind of pass on the parenting role to his mother, I guess. So that was fascinating. And then we've also got Clap When You Land, which is a verse novel. This is featuring Camino and Yahara, who are from the Dominican Republic and America. They are two sisters who didn't know they were sisters. Their father had a second family, and it's only when the father dies that they realise that they have a sibling out there in the world. And it really looks at the difference between their upbringing and the cultures that they both grow up in. There are also some triggering moments, so please be careful if you do have any triggers in books. But what I love most about this book is how, in a society where usually we pitch women against each other, that's not the case in this book. Yes, the girls are interested in how this has happened and how their father had a second family, but it's about the connection that they create together and how they're able to move forward while grieving for their father. Then we have Saving Montgomery Soul by Mariko Tamaki. Now this book I almost DNF'd, but I stuck with it and I absolutely loved it. This is about, what's her name? Oh yeah, Montgomery. This is about a young girl called Montgomery Soul who has a mystery club with her friends at school where they try and solve or explain mysteries and phenomena and all types of fantastical things. And one day Monty finds an amulet online and she buys it, and then she realises that this amulet actually has special powers. It's not a light-hearted exploration of family and religion. It does go very in depth and it does get quite hard going in places and emotional, but overall this is a fantastic story and I loved the relationship with the characters. I thought that her friends were so precious. I loved her family, and I think this is the first novel that I've read by Mariko that hasn't been in collaboration with her cousin Gillian, so this was just excellent. Chef's kiss. Loved it. Then we have Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is the second in the Brown Sisters trilogy, and it's about Danny, who is a female professor. She's also witchy, and it's about Sophia, the security guard at the university she works at, and the fake romance that they create together. Talia Hibbert can do no wrong in my opinion. I loved Chloe Brown, I love Danny Brown, and the next one with TBR is Eve Brown. These are funny and adorable, and it's all about trying to find your joy and being true to yourself. And I love that Sophia himself loves listening to romance books. We don't often get that male perspective of men who read and love romance, but the friendship that these two already had before they fell into their fake dating trope was just absolutely precious. I want to give them both a hug and I want to be friends with them. Then we have Sleigh by Brittany Morris. This is about Kira, who goes to school by day and who runs an online virtual reality game called Sleigh by night. But when somebody is murdered who's part of the Sleigh community, then it is labelled as for thugs and violent and dangerous, and it really explores black culture and the gaming community, and I just thought this was fantastic. I read it in a day. I rarely do that because I get too tired and I need a nap. But I know that everybody has read this in BookTube at this point apart from me. But safe to say, I loved it and I've already pre-ordered her next book. The only non-fiction book that I'm going to include in this video is I Am Not Your Baby Mother by Candice Braithwaite. I actually felt like this read as fiction. It has very much a voicey, accessible style where you literally feel like you're sitting down with Candice. But this is Candice's memoir and non-fiction book, I guess, that really looks at the black experience as a mother in the UK and how that is vastly different from white motherhood. And it also looks at the education system when her children are ready to go into school. It also looks at how dangerous the world is for young black men and the horrors that they have to deal with on a daily basis. You don't need to be a mother to get something from this book, but it is something that I would highly recommend that everybody living in the UK reads, so that you open your eyes to the travesties that are happening around you on a daily basis. The final book that I'm going to talk about is Measuring Up by Measuring Up, which is by I can't say it. The final book that I'm going to talk about is Measuring Up, which is by Lily Lamotte and Anjou. This is a graphic novel about Cece, who has moved to Seattle from Taiwan with her parents, but she's left behind her grandmother who taught her how to cook. and missing her grandmother very much, and with an important birthday coming up, she enters a cooking competition in order to get a plane ticket for her grandmother so she can come and join them in Seattle. And I thought this was a fantastic exploration of what it's like to move to a completely different country, what it's like to have your culture appropriated by white chefs, and who almost tell Cece that the way she cooks her food and the food that her grandmother taught her to make isn't necessarily the right way to do it. And it's all about how Cece really deep dives into her own culture and she learns more about it, and I guess she just starts to own it. She really starts to own her own culture. I thought this was adorable. I loved the friendships that Cece made, and this is one that I haven't seen many people talking about. I don't think I've seen anybody talking about this, but if you have, let me know in the comments down below. Those were all of the books that I absolutely loved in 2020. Yes, I cheated and I did include a few from a couple of different authors, but I just couldn't narrow it down. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments down below, or if you're interested in reading any of them, let me know which ones and I will gush about it until the cows come home. Let me know what your favourite books of 2020 were. But apart from that, thank you for watching and I will see you in the next one.